I saw the new D&D movie Honor Among Thieves, and I gotta talk about it. I want to talk about the good, the bad, and all the stuff that is especially notable for D&D nerds like myself, even though you don't necessarily have to be a huge D&D nerd like me just to enjoy this movie, because that's definitely not the case. Because honestly, being a D&D nerd, there were a few things that actually drove me a little nuts, but also made me appreciate the movie a bit more. But I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. I was super pumped to go see this. I've been waiting for it for a while, so I got to the movie theater early. I got my popcorn. I got the perfect seat. I sat in one of those big, comfy, reclining chairs, and I proceeded to immediately fall asleep. This was actually no fault of the movie. I was just super jet lagged and I kind of just passed out in the movie theater. But it was one of those intense Dolby surround sound theaters. So as soon as the trailers started booming things, I snapped out of it and I was ready to watch the movie. And frankly, when I actually finally woke up and watched this movie, it was a ton of fun. Now, is it some epic movie that's going to rival the Lord of the Rings trilogy? No, of course not. That would be silly and you shouldn't expect that. But what you should expect is a movie in the D&D universe that is enjoyable whether you're a D&D player or just a normal person who likes going to the movies. And I'm going to try not to spoil anything, but as far as the good stuff about this movie, it's just all around fun. The actors do a really good job doing what they do. The story never gets bogged down. It moves at a pretty brisk pace despite the fact that the movie is around 2 hours. And there's even a surprise appearance from an actor that I had no idea was in this movie. And the movie never really takes itself too seriously, but at the same time, you really care about the characters for the most part. There are a couple heartfelt moments and you understand the characters' motivations overall. And keeping on the idea of the good stuff, I have to mention the costumes. Because while the actual environment and everything is pretty solid, the costumes really brought you into the world a bit more. And I'm not just talking about the fact that like Michelle Rodriguez's character is essentially wearing the exact outfit that a barbarian wears in the portrait in the player's handbook for D&D, but the more notable thing is the actual like special effects makeup, because the majority of it is practical from what I could tell. And when they're doing certain D&D related species or races in the Dungeons and Dragons world, that can be kind of difficult to pull off. So there are the races like Dragonborn that look really cool, although they're heads were way bigger than I expected, even though it kind of makes sense. And you even get to see an Aarakocra, which is kind of like a giant bird person, although there is a slight issue with that, which I will dive into in just a second with the D&D nerd stuff. And diving into what's bad about the movie is also related to this little snippet. Because one thing that threw me off is they do introduce tabaxi in the movie, which is like cat people for anybody that doesn't play D&D, but in the D&D games, cat people are like these lean, tall, agile-looking creatures. And in the D&D movie, since they were using mostly practical effects, it kind of looked more like a furry, and that really threw me off a bit. But they're only in one scene, so it's not the end of the world, but it was just something I couldn't help but mention. And honestly, trying to come up with bad stuff that isn't trying to nitpick as a D&D nerd, that's about it. This movie is just tons of fun and you should just go in and enjoy it. But as a hardcore D&D nerd who has an entire YouTube channel dedicated to mostly Dungeons and Dragons, I got a few more things to say, because I felt like I should probably be on that show actually when I saw a few things pop up. Like the Aarakocra that I mentioned. In the movie, they're super tall bird people, but in the D&D world, they're usually like 5 feet tall. I mean, I know that's super nitpicky, but another thing I can't help but mention is that one of the main characters is a druid. And they're constantly wild shaping or turning into a beast. And this is great and fun, but they keep turning into an owlbear, and an owlbear is a monstrosity, not a beast. So in the D&D game, you wouldn't be able to do that, even though the stats can be comparable to other stuff. But still, it was something that kind of started irking me a little bit. Not to mention she wild shapes over and over again, and in the game, they can only wild shape a couple times. But that's, again, me nitpicking pretty intensely. And they make a point of the main character being a bard, but in actuality, when the game, he would probably be more of a rogue with an entertainer background, because he never actually casts any bard spells most of the time. But outside of nitpicking that stuff as a negative, for most D&D nerds, it's actually even better to go see this. They have tons of references that you would only see in the game or people that have taken time to investigate this universe, with constant mentions of the Harpers or the Emerald Enclave, and you're seeing references to spells like Green Flame Blade and Reverse Gravity and all sorts of fun stuff that you always see in games, but seeing it in reality just made it that much more fun. The fact that one of the characters is a sorcerer and his lack of confidence affects his actual spellcasting ability, and the fact that sorcerers in the games rely on their charisma to do so, it was just awesome. But the more notable thing here is that this entire movie is set up like a D&D campaign. Going into it with that mindset, it's so much easier to pick stuff out. Because literally at the very beginning of the movie, the main character is giving you their character backstory. And they're reading it out like I've experienced so many times as a dungeon master and a player telling me their insanely long backstory that is all about their character's motivations and how they became who they are. There's even that moment that they showed in the trailer where the one character casts Speak with Dead, and you get to ask a few questions to a creature that's been dead for a long time, but as soon as they're done, they just go right back to being dead. And it played out almost exactly how I would see it play out in a game before, where the dungeon master is trying to mess with the players a little bit in a fun way, and the players are like asking each other stuff, but because of that, the dead person is actually answering and treating that as actual questions being asked, and immediately goes back to being dead. And it is just so spot on for things that I've experienced. And diving into the idea that this is actually just a campaign, it feels much more realistic with the paladin character that shows up about halfway through the movie, because he acts a little bit differently than everybody else in the party. He is more well known in the community. He acts a little more serious and in character, and he's insanely good at a lot of stuff. And if you keep in mind that this could be a D&D campaign, it's literally just the dungeon master inserting a character into the story to help guide the players on a quest. And if you look at it that way, it is so insanely obvious, because even when he leaves, he like leaves in a very weird way that the rest of the characters totally call out and are like, he's a little weird. And the character literally just shows up for like one quest type of thing. So as I was watching this, I was like, oh my God, I've done this exact thing as a dungeon master. And that character even goes through and starts explaining an overly complicated puzzle, which is something that I've totally done as a dungeon master. And the players, or the rest of the party in this movie, find a very easy way around it that completely destroys the entire setup of the puzzle, just like every dungeon master would get so frustrated with. But it spoke to me so much as a D&D player that it just felt too perfect. Like, oh, here's this complicated puzzle I spent tons of time on, and you destroyed it and immediately found a way around it. So overall, this was just tons of fun. And if you want a D&D module to look into, it's very obvious that they're taking some notes from the Dead and Thay storyline that pops up in the module for D&D. So feel free to check that out if you get the chance. But overall, I think this movie was pretty great. Was it amazing and groundbreaking? No, but it was tons of fun. So if I had to give this some sort of rating, which I don't usually do, but I figured if I'm doing a movie review, I might as well. And if I'm going to do any sort of rating scale, I might as well do it out of 20. So if I was going to roll a d20 for this movie, I'd probably give it a solid 17. Did you see the Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves movie? If you did, let me know what you thought about it in the comments down below. If you want to help support what I do on this channel, feel free to check out my Patreon, link down below. Just like all of these incredible people. Or the especially awesome player character level patrons, Bad in Person, Caleb Roan, Isabel Walker, Carcat Kitsune, Kilon, Melendez Robinson, The Dino 21, Wyatt Newsom, Yaksha Senpai, and Z13. Or going above and beyond that, there's my Dungeon Master level patrons that I actually play D&D with and stream it right here on YouTube as well as over on Twitch. Benjamin, Daniel Galvin, Devin Happy, Eric Wade, GameSteak, Heyo, Kilo Michael, Talon Starkey, and Salvador. And if you're going to see this movie and you want to play a campaign based off of it, I'll be here hoping you roll at least 3 nat 20s on that D&D session, because that's just kind of what I do.